How about that? Excited? I felt the bass while we were up here, so a little rumble under our seats. No, thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight at the beautiful Encore Boston Harbor. My name is Mark D'Amico, and I'll be your host tonight. First and foremost, all of our season ticket members who are here in person, thank you so much for your support. And to all of our fans watching across our Celtics digital channels live right now, thank you as well for tuning in to celebrate 75 years of Celtics history. Thank you. And thank you to our corporate partners, Arbella Insurance and Encore Boston Harbor, for helping us to put on this beautiful event tonight. A beautiful space here, and we wouldn't have been able to put on this platform to select this team without their support. As we all know, this franchise is lush with history. We're here tonight to discuss the 15 members who have been selected by all of you and many of our fans across the world, and a voting panel as the 15 greatest Celtics of all time. I'd like to take a moment to explain this platform to everyone if you did not see it while it was live at the end of 2021, if you may not have cast a ballot. So here we go. Here are the details. We narrowed down all of the Celtics who have ever played for this team down to a list of 75 players. We then asked all of our fans and an esteemed voting panel consisting of more than 30 media members who have covered the Celtics for decades and decades, as well as Celtics historians, to cast their ballots for the 15 greatest Celtics of all time. The voting was weighted. Fans accounted for 50% of the weighted value, and the voting panel also accounted for the remaining 50% of the weighted value. The traction and excitement around the platform was astounding. Over the month that this platform was live, we received more than 60,000 votes from around the world. Pretty incredible number for the short period of time that it was live. Thank you. And as we know, the votes have been in for a while, and we have already revealed the first 10 members of the All-Celtics team. And I'd like to relay their names to you again right now if you have not seen them yet. And these are in no particular order. Larry Bird, Kevin Garnett, Dennis Johnson, Sam Jones, Kevin McHale, Bill Russell, John Havlicek, Bob Cousy, Paul Pierce, and Mike's great friend, Tommy Heinsohn. What an incredible list of 10 players thus far. But as we all know, we've still got 5 more players to go, and hopefully you all haven't been on your phones because we did release this publicly within the last couple of hours. We'd like it to be a surprise to you right now. But without further ado, I'd like to reveal to you the final 5 members as selected by our fans and the media members of the 75th Anniversary All-Celtics Team presented by Arbella Insurance. First, he's a 3-time champion with the Celtics and a member of the original Big Three. A player who scored more than 18,000 points, who grabbed more than 11,000 rebounds, and who blocked more than 1,700 shots in a Celtics uniform. Please join the Celtics in congratulating the Chief, Robert Parrish. Our next member of the team helped to lead the Celtics to 2 titles during the 1970s. And he was the 1973 NBA MVP. He's got some fans in the crowd, I can see. He averaged between 13.9 and 16.2 rebounds per game throughout the first 8 seasons of his career. What an unbelievable number right there. Please join the Celtics in congratulating Dave Cowens. Sneak peek, Dave Cowens is on our first episode of the podcast, of the Celtics podcast that will be released tomorrow if anyone wants to take a listen. Our next player may be the greatest shooter in Celtics history, and he was a member of the new Big Three that led the franchise to Banner 17 in 2008. While in a Celtics uniform, he set the record for the most career three-point makes in NBA history, and he held that record for nearly 12 years until the great Stephen Curry surpassed him earlier this season. Please join the Celtics in congratulating Ray Allen. The next member of our team is a two-time NBA champion, and he was the MVP of the 1976 NBA Finals. He played his first 9+ seasons for the Celtics while making 7 All-Star appearances during those years. Please join us in congratulating the late JoJo White. So there's 14 out of 15. Here comes the last one. And again, these are in no particular order. Now for the final spot on the 15-player roster. He is a 4-time NBA champion who was chosen to 8 All-Star appearances during his 10 seasons with Boston. He was a shooter at heart, and he is credited with introducing shoot-arounds to the game of basketball, which still carry through to every single NBA team to this day. Please join the Celtics in congratulating the late Bill Sharman. What an incredible list of 15 players. Unbelievable that all of these guys played for so long for this one single franchise and accomplished so much. They represent 62 total championships with the Boston Celtics. They cover all 17 banners that hang today in the rafters at TD Garden, and every single member of this 15-player team has been elected to the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to showcase together for the very first time all 15 members of the 75th Anniversary All-Celtics Team presented by Arbella Insurance. Please give them a round of applause. Pretty unbelievable list of players, huh, guys?
Great list.
Well, Scal, maybe on the list of 15 greatest broadcasters for the Celtics. Maybe, okay?
Easy, all right? Easy. Let the kid walk before you
Well, back in November, we sat on this stage. Well, I did not sit on the stage, but these two great gentlemen did. And we had a discussion about who we thought should make this team. Now, obviously, we know who made the team. And so tonight's discussion is about that and about maybe a few people who they think should have made this team. So I'd like to introduce tonight's esteemed panel, 2 of the most well-known sports media personalities in Boston history. And I'm going to start out with the man here to my left. Please welcome a man who has brought Celtics games into your living rooms as the team's play-by-play announcer since 1981. He's a Dorchester native who was a recipient of the 2021 Kurt Gowdy Award, and he was inducted into the media wing of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. I'm proud to call him a friend and a mentor. He is none other than the great Mike Gorman. It doesn't get much better than having these two guys next to each other on stage. The next man I'd like to introduce has spent more than 4 decades at the Boston Globe. He's voted for the NBA's 50th and 75th anniversary teams, as well as the Celtics 75th Anniversary All-Celtics Team. And he's yet another member of the media wing of the Basketball Hall of Fame. Please welcome Bob Ryan. All right, introductions are out of the way. It's time to get into the nitty-gritty of this conversation, guys. So, you know as well as I do, because I was on the voting panel of the media members. It was tough. It was tough to come up with this list of 15 players. And it started to get tough right around 12, 13. You started to try to debate who gets on, who gets off. I want to ask you guys, what was the process that you used to come up with your 15 players? And Bob, we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, you threw it I was throwing it on this very stage, impromptu, with Jackie McMullen back in
We threw you
November.
into it.
And the interesting thing there is that we came up with 14 of the 15 together. We only had one difference. So the great minds think alike thing, But trying to balance, obviously, obvious achievement and stature with historical importance as well, if possible. And the thing is, the bounty of riches here, I just went through my head. I can count 5 Hall of Famers that aren't on this team, Celtic. Now, 3 of them were late and career additions to the, but like Clyde Lovellette and those kind. But Pete Maravich and Dave Bing were Celtics, but they're not going to make this team. But there were two Celtic lifers you had to consider for this team: Frank Ramsey and Casey Jones, and Hall of Famers. So that's how difficult. It's a total bounty of riches. I tried to balance the historical impact, but it really wasn't that hard in that regard because so many of these people are so self-evident. And what I'm really gratified by the way, and congratulate all of you, and I'm not trying to be condescending, but the consensus here, the team, I have 14 of the 15 members of the team that I voted for. And I think that's a reasonable number. But the idea that people didn't forget one guy in particular makes me feel really good, and that's Bill Sharman. Because in the 50s, the preeminent NBA backcourt, without any question, everybody in the world knew Bob Cousy. That's fine. There were two basketball players. If you stopped 100,000 people on the street and said, name a basketball player in 1958, 55, there's one or two people they would have named, Bob Cousy or George Mikan. Cousy's self-evident. But Sharman was one of the first great noted pure shooters in the league. He was a dogged defender, and he, along with Cousy, were the perennial all-league backcourt and on first team All-NBA in the 50s. But I'm just glad enough people, I'm congratulating and thanking everybody for remembering Bill Sharman.
Certainly was not forgotten, and he was not toward the bottom of the list either. He made it with a good margin. Right. Mike, what was your process for trying to narrow down 75 of the greatest Celtics down to 15?
I tried to go by decade. Actually, I found that easier. I don't get into all these comparisons people want to say, like, could this guy play with this guy? Could Kevin Garnett play with Bill Sharman, that kind of stuff. I don't know, and I don't care. I know I loved Bill Sharman during that time of my life. I was watching that, and I felt the same way about the players that are out there right now. But to stick to your question about how did I do it, I broke it down to basically in a decade, and I tried to take close to an equal number of guys from the same decade. But I couldn't do that once I got to the current time. I would put Jason Tatum, for instance, I would put him on the team for what he is going to be and has been already, if you're looking for the 15 best basketball players who have played for the Celtics. Oh, yeah. Very hard to keep that kid out of that argument. Right. So that kind of messed me up a little late. You have Ray Allen was on the Final Five?
Ray Allen is on the Final 15, yes.
He didn't make my Final 15 at all. Oh, did he make the Final Five, did he?
That we're not revealing. We're not revealing the order of the amount of votes for each player. It's just the 15 in general.
Ray Allen's the one.
Why would they do that now? Huh?
Ray Allen's the one missing from my ballot too, and I guess it was just a longevity thing. I voted for a sentimental favorite. I'll be honest. The emotion came into this, and also, but I think it's easy to justify his presence as a preeminent player in a category of the game, namely defense, and a absolute and a Celtic lifer, and just a true competitor. I voted for Sat Sanders. He was my 15th guy.
Sounds like you have a lot of support in voting for Sat Sanders. Did everyone out here vote for Sat Sanders as well?
I did.
Yeah.
I like him.
Can't say no to the bow tie.
No. But I not to slight Ray, so it was Ray Allen, no, and Sat Sanders, yes. The other 14 I voted for as you did.
And the thing for me with Ray Allen was, I've known Ray since he was a freshman at UConn. I was fortunate enough to be doing Big East games all that time and met him when he literally showed up for his first weekend there. So, and then he came to Seattle and played forever, it seemed, in Seattle, and you never knew how he was doing because nobody watches the box scores that late at night or cares about them by the time the next morning comes around. So Ray just kind of disappeared after he got out there, and then he came back and played with Milwaukee, and then came to us, and he was great the time he was with us, but he was here
longevity.
And then he left for some money down in Miami to go play for them, which I don't blame him. I mean, it's a money business. That's what these guys do. But I'm not putting him on my.
I'll give you another guy that had a brief tenure, but if you look at the effect of W and L that he had on this team is one of the most profound, I believe, of anybody in the history of this franchise. In 4 years, go look up what the team one loss when Paul Silas was here, and. Yeah. I'm very, very, very fond of him as a person. But I would have loved to have found a place for him in those 4 years. But those 4 spectacular years, and he was the missing link on the team. back when they got him in '72. He was the Dave DeBusschere deterrent, number one. That's what they wanted, and they got it. And then number two, he was the rebounding partner for Dave Cowens. And Dave Cowens was so enamored of Paul Silas that when Paul Silas left us traded to Denver, that's when Dave Cowens went on his sabbatical, his famous sabbatical, and one of the reasons was he was so upset about losing Paul Silas. That's a testament right there. But that just speaks to how difficult and how bountiful, as I used that word earlier, it is when you're talking about the history of the Boston Celtics. You have so many great players.
And we're going to get into that in a moment, but I was planning on saving this conversation for a little later in this discussion about Ray Allen. But I think there's going to be a lot of discussion both on social media and here tonight about Ray Allen making this team. Fortunately, I had a pretty good source I was able to speak to. I'm plugging our podcast yet again. But I did speak to him on Friday, Paul Pierce. I was able to speak to Paul Pierce about Ray making this team. And I wrote down a couple of things that Paul said when he heard about this. I told him, and I said, what are your thoughts on this? And he responded, the very first words that came out of his mouth, they got it right. And then he said, Ray Allen is the clutchest player I've ever played with. And if you listen to the podcast that comes out tomorrow, he goes on to talk about the weight that was lifted off of Paul Pierce's shoulders being out on the court during the final few minutes of a game. If you head into overtime, heading to the NBA Finals and winning a championship, the amount of weight that was lifted off of his personal shoulders that he had shouldered for so long, as both of you know, he said that just changed the way that he saw the game, being able to have someone out there that will also take and make that big shot.
I don't certainly have no problem with anything Paul would say, and have no problem with Ray. It's a question of time and grade.
Yeah.
You have to be on the team for a little while before you want to consider one of the all-time greats. I mean, he's got a living room full of jerseys with his name on the back of it. So, why do we have to be the one who singles him out and brings him in the Hall of Fame? Again, I love Ray. I do. I played golf with Ray. I know him really well. And he would love to be on this team because he loves being recognized for what he did, and for a long time, I meant that in a humorous way, but Bob will tell you, nobody listens to the Seattle Supersonic box scores 18 years ago, and there's Ray out there scoring 30 a game, and nobody knows it.
No.
Again,
it's funny about Ray, everybody, we think of Ray, we think of one thing, the three-point shooting, but there's one shot in his career that sticks in my mind more than any other as a Celtic. God knows about the one he made for Miami. But he clinched the 24-point comeback in L.A., with a left-hand drive down the lane. I had the perfect view from behind, right looking at it, and it was a great shot, and he could go to the basket when he had to, believe me, very nicely, and that was the biggest drive that I remember, for me, and in all my years I saw the Celtics, that one drive I remember more than any other in terms of just going to the basket, and it was Ray Allen, it was with the left hand, and it was talk about clutch, it was a huge basket.
See, he even had winning shots for other teams. So let's keep the winning shots Ray on our team. That'd be
well, the last thing that I'll say about Ray's inclusion on this team, which I find most interesting, is that it was not a ceremonial exit when he left the Boston Celtics. And obviously, some of the fans didn't love it. Some of the players didn't love it. So the fact that he still made this team, despite that, I think says a lot about what the latest generation of Celtics fans
all these fans are.
That saw that most recent title think of him and think of his shooting ability. Let's move this conversation on to what you were touching on there, Bob, with just the amount of depth of history and great players that are within this organization. You all have been blessed for years and years to watch so much talent take the parquet, and you guys have been blessed to watch and call these games and write about them. Just how unique is the level of talent that's walked through these doors with relation to the NBA?
The only team that can remotely match it is the Lakers. And
can they match it, in your estimation?
They would probably make
it's only a two-team debate.
Yeah.
When you include Minneapolis as well as
different city. Doesn't count,
it's
right?
The same franchise. No, I'm a big believer. It's the franchise. It's the same franchise. Elgin Baylor played for the Minneapolis Lakers and back against the Celtics in the 1959 finals. Okay, he went there and established basketball in L.A. along with Jerry West. So no, the Lakers are the only one possible. And then with them, you have to throw in Mikan. You have to throw in Jim Pollard, Vern Mickelson, Slater Martin. They had some guys. There's four great players in the 50s. they're the ones that could make the argument, you know, obviously. Then you start looking at all the centers they had, whether they were imports or, and well, none of them, they were all imports. Wilt, Kareem, Shaq, they're all imports. None of them were drafted by the Lakers, but they were firm Lakers. They've got a lot of guys, and you know, and of course, God knows, you know, so that would be the one. But I don't think if we annotate, and I haven't done it specifically, but somebody's got pen and paper there, go do it. The Celtics will still win out with the number, but they're the only ones that could challenge the Celtics.
And to your point, most of these players that made this list were drafted and signed by the Celtics. They weren't acquired through free agency or through trades. Well, some of them were for sure, but many of them were drafted.
One, two. Hey,
Bob's going to go right down the list.
no,
right
there's only two guys in this list who weren't drafted by the Celtics, and that's Paul Pierce and Dennis Johnson. KG, 3. That's not bad. 3 out of 15. Anyway,
It's pretty impressive.
I was looking at my list, which doesn't have Ray Allen. So anyway, that's a very good percentage. Yeah, that's a very good percentage, and that's a whole other story.
And just speak to how it's changed both of your careers to be able to watch so many of these great players play in front of your very own eyes throughout the years in your careers.
I was grown up as a basketball oriented kid. You know, the word junkie didn't apply in the 50s, but I was one of, and now for my personal story, I grew up, I wouldn't say I rooted actively against them, but I did not root for them. I am from Trenton, New Jersey. If I had a team to root for in the NBA, I was more of a college guy growing up, it would be Philadelphia. And even when I was at BC from 64 to 68, I steadfastly rooted against the Celtics if they were playing Sixers. And the first time I ever pulled for the Celtics was the 69 finals. And by the way, go read Lee Montville's wonderful book, Tall Men, Short Shorts, on that. You are the audience. You will love his book. Go get it, and you'll enjoy it, and you'll thank me later, as they say. But anyway, what a thrill! What a thrill to have been rooting to see Bill Russell beat the team I rooted for, but to know how good he was, and then to walk into all this. And the guy who had the biggest impression on me originally was John Havlicek, and to get to know John Havlicek was was an incredible thrill for a young guy in his 20s, I was 23 years old when I started covering the team in 1969. And John couldn't have been more gracious. You talk about a superstar who treated everybody, whether it was a high school kid coming in or a famous national columnist, he treated them all with great dignity and respect. You can't say enough good things about John Havlicek.
And Mike, how about you? How has covering the Celtics on a day-to-day basis and calling these games and seeing these guys play every night changed your life?
Well, it even goes back to that. It goes further back than that. If you ever drove through Neponset Circle coming back from the Cape in about 1958 maybe, there was one kid who was sitting on the Record American newspapers he was supposed to be selling to the people coming by, reading box scores, and that was me. And I was about 11 or 12 years old, I think, when I was doing that. So that's the first time the team really touched me. And I remember very clearly the first championship that they won, not because, God forbid it would ever be on TV. It never would be in those days. But even it was tough to find it sometimes on the radio, and then you couldn't understand what John was saying anyway. So you were just kind of waiting for the score, right? You were listening to the same broadcast I was. But I remember distinctly seeing the headline about Tom Heinsohn and the performance he had in winning the Celtics World Championship, which was what, 37
points, 23 rebounds.
Yeah. And he missed 9 free throws in the game. He did. He'll tell you about it.
Saying he should have had 45?
Exactly. That was, as a youth, I really loved it. And then when I was working in Providence, doing the Providence basketball games, and we needed a color guy, and I said, why don't we go get Tom Heinsohn? And somebody said, yeah, you can't get Tommy Heinsohn. He's not going to drive down here. Tommy drove down when I called him and signed a contract that day to do 5 games and sold me a life insurance policy. That's the truth. That's the truth.
Yeah,
he should be in the Hall of Fame for that, too.
I looked at that the other way because I figured I got him now. I got him right by the insurance. So Tommy started affecting me at a very early age. And then he just became my big brother, my best friend, put them all together. So it still is hard for me to talk about him, as you can tell. But he was wonderful, and he loved the game more than anything else. He loved the Celtics more than anything else. And we would tell other guys when they came to town, especially early on, we would say, hey, look, we want the Celtics to win every game. We prefer double figures. Every once in a while, a close one would be nice, but you get no partial broadcast here. If you're looking for a partial broadcast, turn the dial, go somewhere else, because we're not going to give it to you. And that's the way we did. I had, again, it's an old story, but it's really true. The very first game I did with Tommy against the Indiana Pacers, I had all my sheets right up in front of me on the first balcony of the overhang, and I got different colors for field goal percentage and free throw percentage, and his sister did this, and his brother did this, and his father does this. I had notes on every single guy. So Tommy comes walking up. I hadn't even seen him yet that day. He comes walking into the booth about 5 minutes before we were supposed to go on the air, and he comes down on that gondola. Remember they used to hang off the first balcony at the Boston Garden? That's where we did the game from. So he comes down here, and he walks up to me, and he goes, "What's this?"
Stuff.
You fill in the blank.
Begins with S.
Yes, again. And I said, "Those are my notes." And he goes, "We don't need any notes." And he brings it down, crumples them up in a big ball.
He threw them out?
Threw them out off the top of the gondola, right? Now, I am like, shit, I don't know what I'm going to do now. I've never done a game in my life. All the notes are down there.
Thanks for not doing that to me tonight, Mike. I would have been in trouble.
He put his arm around me, and he said, he didn't drop my notes, but he put his arm around my shoulder, and he just said, "Son, we're going to talk about what we see in front of us." And that's how, it was great, because I never did homework again for any basketball game. I did with Tommy, because what the heck, he wasn't going to get in the game anywhere anyway. And we would sit there and we would talk about what was happening in front of us. And once you got by the bombastic side of him, he just knew the sport, as Bob would attest, because Bob had a unique relationship with Tommy. He knew the sport inside out.
Oh, yeah. Oh, positively. And he loved the sport. And he was very anecdotal, very anecdotal. I learned so much from him and heard so many great stories. It was a privilege. I think back, just imagine being this 23-year-old kid who loved basketball and now being thrown into this new environment of the NBA with the Boston Celtics. And the first year wasn't a great year, as you know, 69-70. And then Cowens came. And that, that was the beginning of the new era. And when people talk, look, the greatest team was 85-86. All right, let's establish that. I mean, nobody's going to argue that. But to be around in 72-73 when they're winning 68 games, and they would have won if John didn't get hurt. All right, John got hurt in game.
Who was the coach?
The coach? That was Tom Heinsohn.
That was Tommy.
That was Tom Heinsohn. 68 games.
You have to give him plugs all the time.
Best running team. They ran a fast break. It was a thing of beauty. It was. I mean, what can I say? It was an ecstasy. It was an incredible experience for me.
Well, Bob, you just mentioned 23 years old, coming here to cover the Celtics in the NBA in general. I was 22 when I got here, and I'm a native New Yorker, and I didn't know a whole lot about Celtics. And the first thing that I did when I got here, my boss told me, dive in on the history. And the first name that I started to learn was Tommy Heinsohn, and it was incredible to meet him. It was incredible to watch him and hear his conversations in the media room throughout the years, and then learning all of these other great names that are on this list. It's been an incredible pleasure for me to be able to learn about these people that many of you were able to watch in person. I do want to...
If I can just one last Tommy thing,
Yep.
okay? And most people don't know this. He was, 31 when he retired? And he had
30.
Yeah,
he had
and
bad
8
knees.
championships. He's 30 years old. And he's done.
Tommy was only 30 when he retired because this is medical science hadn't been what it was
No.
not what it is. Very similar to Bobby Orr. They would have scoped him, he would have been fine.
Yep.
But he was bone on bone by the time he was 30. So his smoking didn't help either, I must say.
No, it didn't. Nor did his choice of suit coats either. That didn't. But he knew a lot of other stuff, a lot of other good stuff.
But he was a great player, and as you can't get away from that being a rookie. Imagine in 1957, April 15th, 1957, Game 7 against the Hawks, and Tommy goes for 37 and 23 before fouling out in the second overtime. And he and Russell carried them. The two veterans, Cousy and Sharman, shot 5. Are you ready? 5 for 41. Yeah. Together. And Cousy threw an airball free throw, which Heinsohn always kidded about. Hit him on the shoulder as he moved in to get the rebound. That hit him on the shoulder. But the rookies carried them, and we haven't talked much about Russell. But so I didn't cover Russell. I covered him as a coach in Seattle later. and then Sacramento. But you know, obviously the first name I hope everybody put down on their ballot was, I hope it was Bill Russell.
Yeah, I think there were, at the very least, a handful of very, very obvious choices as you started to put together this list. And then, you know, as you got farther down, it got a little bit more difficult. But that's kind of what I want to wrap up with here, is maybe a few names that didn't wind up on this list that maybe some of us might have had. I'm sure some of you had some of these names on the list. Actually, one person that I did have on the list that didn't make the final 15 was Don Nelson. What are your thoughts on Don Nelson?
Glad you mentioned it. I had to give him thought. Don Nelson's a special Celtic in many ways, it's a tribute to the depth of this great Celtic history that Don Nelson's not on this team. He was an immense contributor from 1966 when he was signed until he retired, and 75, 76. I could go on and on about Nelly and what a character and great pleasure it was to know him. But deadly mid-range shooter. One night in Buffalo in the playoffs, he went 10 for 10, and they were in two categories for him: foul line jump shots or offensive rebounds. And he was a master of the trailer on the fast break. He was a terrific offensive rebounder. He was just a very, very smart player. It was tough leaving Nelly off. As I mentioned, the other guy I hated leaving off, but I couldn't justify 4 years, not Silas. When they played together, you know. There you go.
Is anyone else in this crowd shocked every time they hear Bob Ryan's photographic memory? He remembers the box score from
crazy,
50
right?
years ago. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I'm trying to hit singles here. This guy's.
Mike, one other guy who we are around quite often, who didn't make this list but was right teetering on making this list, is Cedric Maxwell.
No, Max.
He's on my list.
Yeah,
he was on
he
my
was
list.
on your
No
list.
question about that.
Two-time champion.
How can you be the MVP
Yeah,
of the finals and
MVP.
not be on somebody's list? I don't get that.
And his number 31 obviously is up in the rafters. So he was on your ballot. He did not make mine. But what are your guys'
You're from
thoughts?
New York. That's what you mean.
Yeah, that might be it. I'll take it. What are you guys' thoughts on Max and kind of just being outside of the 15?
Yeah, it's tough. That's a tough one. I feel badly about that. Max has become such a vital part of the Celtic family all these years as a broadcaster. We all love Max. I personally, you know, enjoy his company immensely. In '81, he was the legitimate MVP. Game 5, he had 28 points coming home after a devastating loss in Houston, and Max is the one. And of course, we all remember '84, Game 7. Jump on my back, boys. This is not myth, it's true. Whatever the exact specific wording was, it was true. He said that and he did it. He took Worthy to school in that game. The only problem with Max, and is it didn't end well. And the 84-85 was a mess. And he got traded and he produced Bill Walton. So he provided the service upon his exit. But that's the only negative, you know, is it didn't end well.
And speaking of things that didn't end particularly well,
Uh-oh.
one guy who nobody mentions, and I wasn't the biggest fan of this guy, but he was very important. I thought the Celtics, and that's Antoine Walker.
Oh, yeah.
All during a time that the Celtics were bad, he was good.
Yeah.
And he never won beans. He had
I think-
issues on and off the court, but on the court he tried. I mean, he gave it a good effort every night out. You could never put him on a team like this, but he needs to be mentioned anyway.
No, he's the most polarizing Celtic player
Yeah,
ever,
without
I think. People love him or hate him. The young people loved him. In those days, there were lots of 8 jerseys floating around Greater Boston. He was immensely popular with young people. They didn't mind the shimmy. All us old guys hated the shimmy, right? And you know, I remember
I had a hard time with that on the
I
air.
remember writing a column after one of his games in the playoffs in Indiana, the good Antoine, you know, versus the bad Antoine, and it was always like that. But he was immensely skilled. It wasn't always applied. His energy applied the right way, you know. And I always said he was a player whose whole exceeded the sum of its parts. You know, it didn't quite work out. But he carried the team through some tough times. I give him that. Definitely.
Tommy used to sit there, and if you took a shot, you know, the TV camera calls a hero, they follow you up the court. Once the shot was up, Tommy had nothing more to do with you. He was looking to get the ball in and run with it. Run off made free throws. He always used to say, if you can do that, you really are a running team. But Antoine would go into his shaking routine, and Tommy wasn't looking. He'd just go, "Why? What's he doing now? What's he doing now?"
Antoine was a little before his time too, right? With the 3-point, he was taking 7 or 8 3-pointers a game,
Yes,
and
he
now that's normal nowadays.
Dismay of many
I don't know. Yeah, exactly. I don't know if he was supposed to be taking that many threes at that time, but another player that was very close to making the team. Our recent generations of fans were certainly out in full force. Rajon Rondo nearly made the team, so there's a good,
I could see that.
Yep. There's a
I'm
good
an old guy, and I could see that.
Yep. There's a good 5, 6, 7, 8 guys who were really close to making this team. So it was a very close voting tally.
It's an honor to make this team with this franchise. Period. No other franchise has, and with and Lakers. I say they're number 2, but the Celtics are number 1.
A distant number
for the
2, if
history.
you ask me.
Absolutely.
I'm in the honor to be in the presence of those sneakers right there. I can't believe those are,
I don't know if we can get a shot of them,
just
but
walk by this guy on the way
we've got
out.
the green sneakers. We are running a little bit short on time. We got about 10 or so minutes left, so we're going to actually open it up for a few questions from the crowd. If we've got a few questions for Q&A, we've got a hand raised already in the back corner. What's your question?
I agree with 14 of the 15 guys, and you named a lot of other guys that were with them. You left out one guy with 11 championships as a Celtic. 8-0 as a player.
Casey.
One is assistant coach, two is a head coach.
Casey.
I don't know how you...
Yeah, that's Casey Jones. The comment was basically one person who's been left off the list who we haven't really discussed tonight. He's won, how many titles was that? 11?
Yeah.
8 as a player, 8 as a player.
8 as a player and 3 as a coach. That's,
Two is a head coach, one is assistant.
excuse me, yep, 3 as a coach in general, 2 as a head coach, 1 as an assistant coach, but that's 11 total with the franchise. That's Casey
Didn't you have
Jones.
that thing, Bob, where they went, he graduated from the University of San Francisco. They were undefeated the last 2 years he was there, won 2 championships. He comes to
Well, he was-
Then he goes, wait a minute, let me finish. He goes to the Olympics, wins the gold medal.
Yeah.
Then comes back with Russell, wins an NBA championship.
Yeah, he did. He was there. He
All
was
in 1 year.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, no. I did mention earlier on that he was one of the Celtic lifers, Hall of Famers, who did not make this team, as testament to the depth. I'm not going to say anything bad about KC, and it was certainly worth considering, and it is entirely conceivable we blew it. All right, maybe when you look at the totality, when you look at it from the framework of overall organizational contribution, as you said, not just the player, but the coach. Yeah, we may have blown that. I'm not. You may be right.
There was one thing that Casey could not avoid, and that was, or walk away from, which was a piano. And if we checked into a hotel and there was a piano, his bags went to the room, he walked right to the piano, sat down, started to play. Eventually people come over and start to sing. It would go on for hours.
And he was good.
He was good, is right. He was really
when
good.
he passed, his daughter helped provide some tweet videos, and some of his appearances down at the Last Hurrah at downtown. He could sing. He was really good. Yes. Yes, sir.
All right. Couple more questions? Go ahead. Lusky?
If there was a fight.
The next level. No, that's all. That's how good this team. But Lusky was a special type of player and a beloved player, but he can't make the top 15. You can't. I don't think.
Maybe an all-fight team.
No. But when the fight starts, I want
We'll do
Lusky.
that next year.
Maxwell's on that team for sure, because he went down in Philly, he went after the guy up the aisle.
Oof. Off the cuff.
Just
You
see,
have
right
the
away
list
there's
in
a-
front of you if you want to take a look.
Havlicek, Bird, Kuzi, Russell. See, I'd put Paul Pierce there, but I'd probably get laughed out of the room. But I'd put Paul Pierce.
No, you wouldn't get laughed out.
Maybe a sixth man of the year, Ramsey.
Well, this is tough. What do you do with Havlicek? Do you want to bring him off the bench, or you got to start him? You know he's one of the 3 best players.
Yeah.
After
He's the all-time leading scorer.
it's Russell, Bird, Havlicek, and Kuzi. That's your Rushmore for me. That's the Celtic Rushmore. Then the only question is who's 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, Russell obviously, Bird obviously. Havlicek. If he has to start, then it's got to be Havlicek. Mm-hmm. Then it's going to be Kuzi and Sam for me. There we go.
Sam.
And I'll bring Pierce off the bench. But Sam, I think Sam's one of the most underrated Hall of Famers ever. He doesn't get his.
Why is that?
Sam was a great player, and the arc was much of the time. No way a guy like that, or a guy like KC, but particularly Sam, sits on the bench patiently for a couple of years while waiting for the veterans to retire. They were able to keep him in that regard. So Sam was a great player. But now the other thing is McHale. Ooh, you know. But there's my team, and I'll start Sam, and I have to have. If I can bring John off the bench, then I wouldn't mind putting Pearson there. But otherwise, John has to. John is a better player. Let's get honest. Let's be honest.
Yeah, something tells me that team would do pretty well. All right, let's take a question from this side.
Great. Thanks again for all the stories, guys. You bring back a lot of memories. Johnny Most story, please.
A Johnny Most story is the request from the crowd. You have to do the impression, too.
No, I can't do the impression. All I know, it's not really a good story, but it might have a laugh at the end of the one line. John was complaining for a long time, one of the years, about not hearing very well. And he thought his hearing was going. And he complained, He got through the whole season, got through the spring. We were saying, go to a doctor, John. No, I'll be all right. He about total from the first time he started saying he couldn't hear very well till when this happened was maybe like 9 months. We got him into a doctor, and the doctor took an earpiece out of his ear.
Yeah. Yep.
True?
True. I don't even know where to start, except that when I was in 1970 during the exhibition season, my first exhibition season, because I didn't get to have one my first year. I was thrown in on opening night cold. We were in Binghamton, New York, and I actually went out rooming with John one night and learning what a fascinating man he was. Very bright guy. You know, he wrote haiku. He was a poet. He wrote haiku. He was an expert on big bands. He was a huge Benny Goodman fan, and he knew the big band era cold. He had been a navigator and a bomber in World War II. He was one of the toughest guys, tough guy, and the stories about that and on the road or Legion. He was one of a kind. Trust me, one of a kind, and it was so much fun to be around him. And but I grew up. I came up here, as I told you, in '64 from New Jersey, listening to the games, and then not. It's a shock, when John. But here's one for you. In 1969, my first year, we weren't traveling on the road during the regular season. So how did I do road games? If it was on TV, but they didn't get on TV till Channel 27 came on the air in January of 70, I think, that's when it was. Bob Foraker and Tommy, I think. Well, Bob Foraker anyway. No, Tommy was the coach. Bob Foraker. Anyway, but some of the games weren't on TV, and therefore you had to listen to Johnny's broadcast in the office, do the play-by-play on your sheet, listen to Johnny, and hope that it was some remote comparison to what was actually happening. And I remember one night they were playing the Bulls, and I think Van Leer, Sloan, it was Sloan, of course. Jerry was a master of flopping, and he could take a legitimate charge, but he lured Havlicek into a flop, with a flop at the end of the game. And Johnny went into that voice I call dog whistle. And I'm supposed to be, I don't know what happened. I'm just on the radio. I don't know if the shot went in, if the shot went out, if Sloan got arrested, if Havlicek got kidnapped. I didn't know what happened. But that was Johnny. God love him. It was wonderful.
A very similar moment when Bird got in a fight with Dr. J. You can find this on YouTube. Listen to Johnny's description. It's not words, it's just kind of sounds that can come out of him that are obviously directed in a bad way towards anybody except Larry Bird, who was getting whaled, by the way.
I know what I'm doing when I get home tonight now.
Yeah, you could.
All right, we'll take one more question.
Let me just say one more.
Yep.
This one comes to mind since it was Johnny. So one of these nights, I'm listening to Johnny, and it's in the Cowens era. It's the first year. And I was on the road for some reason. And Cowens, it was a 2 or 3, I did a game, a tip. Jay was tipping. And he goes, big red. Big red. that was, I guess the ball went in, Oh, it was. But you know what? He was a very good basketball announcer who embellished it with his Celtics and partisanship when I first got here. I think the turning point when he became all good guys, bad guys, all black hat, white hat, was Cowens. And from that point on, it was always good guys, bad guys. Always. But if you listen to him, if you ever get some tough stuff of him in the 60s, and the 50s and 60s, he was just a very good announcer who loved the Celtics, but he was a little bit fairer to the other team than the one guy, one exception he loved, Jerry West. He loved gentleman jury, quote unquote. So that's the one villain. But who can forget McFilthy and McNasty? Except there were two versions of them. That was the best part.
All right, we'll take one more question up front here.
Outside of Red, and obviously Tommy's on this team, what former Celtics coach would you have coached this team?
Question is outside of Red. And who else did you mention? And Tommy. Outside of Red and Tommy, what other coach would you have coached this team?
Bill Russell.
Bill Russell. Why is
You know
that?
what? For if I got to win a game tonight and preparation and the man passed away today, Bill Fitch. Mm-hmm. Bill Fitch. Now it was he wore out his welcome. Okay, it was a 4-year stint, and by '83, if you do hear or read anything that says that the players started to tune him out, it's true, with one exception. Guess who? 33. Larry was the most coachable superstar you can imagine. He loved authority, but Bill wore out just about everybody else. I won't say everybody, I can't be sure, but pretty much everybody, but not Larry. But Bill was that first year, they needed a real coach, and they got it. And he was great for Larry. He was great for Max. He was great for Robert. He whipped them into shape. Believe me. But after a while, he didn't have Plan B. He had that one gear, and after 4 years, it wore on people. But I'd say Bill Fitch for
True Bill Fitch story. In later years, he was just a delightful man, great sense of humor. Very, very funny guy. But he wasn't very particularly funny this first day. It was the first game that I was doing in the Garden that he was the head coach. And so I went to his office, knocked on the door, and I went in. I'll never forget this. He's sitting there, and he looks up and he goes, "What?" And I was like, oh, shit, I shouldn't have come here. And so I said, look, I just wanted to wish you luck tonight, Coach, and if there was any way, maybe before games, I could come in and see you for 2 or 3 minutes, get an idea what you might want to do tonight. He goes, whoa. You're not coming in here. You're not going to see anything in here. Either by Christmas, everything's going to be fine, or you'll be gone. Oh, that's no lie.
So everything was fine.
Right? Yeah. We did turn out fine, but
Good. No, I'm
it took
happy
me a
about
while to get
that.
by.
I would just say he was encyclopedic. He knew his knowledge of the league, of the player. Remember, he had been a college coach,
Yes.
and a successful one at Bowling Green, Minnesota. He knew the NBA roster of the time because he had either recruited some of those guys or he recruited against some of those guys, and he knew every player, the alma mater, his high school, and he was absolutely and completely encyclopedic in his basketball knowledge. And I really I learned a lot of stuff in his being around him. I missed him. I got along great with him. I loved him, and not everybody did. I'll be honest. But so I don't know if you haven't heard, but he did pass away today at age 90, and he should be remembered. He was a very important figure in Celtic history.
Mm-hmm. No question about it. Lots of quotes from Larry Bird on him that came out over the last 24
good.
hours since
Glad
he
to hear
passed.
that.
So certainly we mourn his loss, but we appreciate you guys being on stage to have this conversation. Before we wrap up, we're actually going to raffle off a couple of signed Paul Pierce balls to a couple of lucky fans who are in the crowd. Are we just pulling names here? All right, let's do it. Should I pull one and have these guys pull one? Let's see. You guys want to pull one for us?
Sure.
I can take this up here.
Where's my wife in here?
All right, I will read off our first winner. Good luck. The number is 765233, ending up with Larry Bird. Do we have a winner? Do we not have a winner?
Let's try another one here. Here we go. 765250.
We got a winner up front.
There we go.
All right. One more time. If we don't get a response on this one, we'll let Bob read off his 765233.
And 7.
No winner. Okay. Bob.
765235. Reggie Lewis.
All right. There it is in the back. Fantastic. Well, a great way to wrap up an incredible event. We just want to thank you all again for being here with us live in person at Encore Boston Harbor. Thank all of our fans for watching on Celtics Digital. Thank you to all of those who voted to cast the ballots for this 75th Anniversary All-Celtics Team presented by Arbella Insurance. And we look forward to having everyone back here in, 2047 for the 100th anniversary? All right, we'll run it back in 25 years. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.